Chicago, Illinois. The Southside Athletic Club. November 1968. The city was locked in that particular kind of Midwestern autumn cold where the wind cuts through clothing like it has personal grievances, where the gray sky presses down heavy enough to make optimism feel like work, where even the buildings seem to huddle together for warmth. But inside the Southside Athletic Club on 47th Street, the temperature was comfortable, maintained at exactly 68 degrees because serious athletes required precise environmental conditions for optimal training. This wasn't some neighborhood gym with rusty equipment and peeling paint. The Southside Athletic Club was a premier training facility, the kind of place where professional boxers prepared for championship fights, where Olympic hopefuls refined their techniques, where trainers with decades of experience worked with athletes who had legitimate shots at titles and glory. The membership fees were high enough to keep out casual fitness enthusiasts, and the atmosphere was serious, focused, professional. The walls were covered with photographs of champions, framed newspaper clippings announcing victories, signed gloves from fighters who'd gone on to greatness. The equipment was top tier, heavy bags that cost more than most people's monthly rent, speed bags mounted with precision, a full-size professional boxing ring that had seen thousands of rounds of serious sparring. The locker rooms had actual lockers, not just hooks on walls, and the showers worked consistently with hot water, luxuries that separated this facility from the grimy boxing gyms scattered throughout less affluent neighborhoods. The trainers here weren't ex-fighters telling stories about the old days. They were active professionals, men who'd fought recently or who'd retired only because age or injury had forced them out, who understood modern boxing, who kept current with evolving techniques and strategies. They worked with fighters who had real prospects, real talent, real dedication to the sport, and the crown jewel of the Southside Athletic Club's roster was Derek, the Southside Snake, Williams. Derek Williams was 26 years old, standing 5'11", walking around at 168 pounds, competing as a middleweight with a professional record of 23 wins, 2 losses, with 17 knockouts. But those numbers, impressive as they were, didn't fully capture what made Derek special. He was fast, genuinely fast, with hand speed that tested at the extreme end of professional boxer measurements. His jab could land 3 times before most opponents realized he'd thrown it. His combinations were crisp and precise, like watching someone type rapidly on a keyboard, each punch flowing naturally into the next. Derek had boxed in the 1964 Olympics as an alternate, hadn't competed but had trained with the team, absorbed elite-level coaching. He'd turned professional immediately after, signed with a reputable management team, and had been systematically built up through increasingly difficult opposition. His 2 losses were both split decisions against top 10 ranked fighters, controversial enough that many observers thought Derek had actually won both fights. The boxing press was beginning to mention his name as a future contender, maybe even a future champion if he continued developing. But what made Derek truly dangerous wasn't just his physical speed or his technical skill. It was his ring intelligence, his ability to read opponents, to recognize patterns, to adjust mid-fight to whatever strategy his opponent employed. He could box at distance, using his jab to control range and score points. He could fight in close, using short hooks and uppercuts to devastating effect. He could brawl when necessary, could take a punch when he had to, could weather storms and come back strong in later rounds. Derek's training regimen was intense and scientific. He worked with a nutritionist who'd studied sports science at the University of Illinois, a strength and conditioning coach who'd worked with professional football players, and a boxing trainer named Earl Thompson who'd been in the corner for 2 world champions. Every aspect of Derek's preparation was measured, optimized, refined. His training schedule was planned months in advance. His sparring partners were carefully selected to replicate the styles of upcoming opponents. His diet was calibrated to maintain optimal weight while maximizing energy and recovery. He was, in every measurable way, a professional athlete operating at the highest level of his sport, someone who dedicated his entire adult life to the pursuit of boxing excellence and who'd achieved remarkable success through talent, discipline, and intelligent training. Derek was in the middle of his afternoon training session when the conversation started, working combinations on the heavy bag with his trainer Earl Thompson calling out sequences, when one of the other fighters, a light heavyweight named Marcus Reed, mentioned something he'd read in a magazine. "Hey, Derek," Marcus called out between his own rounds on the speed bag. "You see this article about Bruce Lee? Says here he claims he could beat professional boxers using his kung fu." Derek stopped punching, breathing hard, sweat running down his face despite the climate control. He grabbed a towel and wiped his forehead, walking over to where Marcus stood. "Bruce Lee? That guy from the Green Hornet?" Derek's tone was dismissive. "The TV show where he plays a chauffeur who does karate or whatever?" "Yeah, that's him," Marcus confirmed, holding up the magazine. "But the article says he's developed his own martial arts system. Calls it Jeet Kune Do, claims it's superior to traditional martial arts and boxing, says he's beaten several professional fighters in private matches." Earl Thompson, Derek's trainer, joined the conversation. He was 58 years old, had been around boxing for 4 decades, had seen every kind of fighter, every style, every gimmick. His face showed skepticism that bordered on contempt. "I've been hearing these stories for years," Earl said, his voice carrying the authority of experience. "Some kung fu master claims he's got secret techniques that can beat boxers. Then, when it comes time to actually prove it, there's always an excuse. My techniques are too dangerous for the ring. Boxing rules don't allow my deadly strikes. I only fight in private because I don't want to hurt anyone. It's all marketing. So you're all hyped to sell lessons to people who don't know better." Derek nodded, returning to the heavy bag. If this Bruce Lee guy was really as good as he claims, he'd compete professionally. He'd enter tournaments, test himself against real competition. The fact that he's doing demonstrations and TV shows instead of fighting tells you everything you need to know. He's an actor playing a martial artist, not an actual fighter. The conversation would have ended there, just another brief discussion about martial arts mythology versus boxing reality, except that Bruce Lee was in Chicago that weekend. He'd been invited by a local martial arts instructor named Bob Breen, who'd studied Wing Chun in San Francisco and had followed Bruce's evolution from traditional kung fu to his own hybrid system. Bob had opened a school on the North Side and had been teaching some of Bruce's principles, and he'd invited Bruce to give a seminar, demonstrate techniques, maybe work with some of his more advanced students. Bob Breen also happened to be friends with Marcus Reed, the light heavyweight who'd mentioned the magazine article. They'd grown up in the same neighborhood, had stayed in touch despite taking different paths, Marcus into professional boxing and Bob into martial arts instruction. When Bob mentioned that Bruce would be in town, Marcus had an idea. That evening, Marcus called Bob from the payphone at the South Side Athletic Club. "Bob, you remember all those conversations we've had about whether kung fu could work against boxing?" Marcus started. "Of course," Bob replied. "You keep telling me boxing would destroy any martial artist, and I keep trying to explain that what Bruce teaches is different from traditional kung fu." "Well, how about we settle it? Bruce is here this weekend, right? Bring him by the Southside Athletic Club tomorrow afternoon. Let him meet some real professional boxers, see what they think of his system, maybe even do a demonstration." Bob hesitated, sensing this was more than just a friendly visit. "Marcus, what's really going on? Is this a setup? Are you guys planning to challenge him or embarrass him?" "No setup," Marcus assured him, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just professional curiosity. If Bruce Lee is really as good as you say, as good as these magazine articles claim, then he should be happy to demonstrate for people who actually understand fighting. And if he's not willing to do that, then maybe that tells us something too." Bob thought about it. He knew Bruce well enough to know he didn't back down from challenges, didn't avoid testing his techniques against resistance. But he also knew the boxing community could be hostile to martial artists, dismissive and disrespectful. "I'll ask him," Bob finally said, "but I'm not going to pressure him. If he wants to visit, great. If not, that's his choice." When Bob mentioned the invitation to Bruce the next morning over breakfast at a diner on the North Side, Bruce's reaction was immediate interest. "A professional boxing gym?" Bruce asked, sipping his tea. "With active professional fighters?" "Yeah, the South Side Athletic Club. It's legit, not some neighborhood place. They've got fighters ranked nationally, serious trainers, real talent." "And they want me to demonstrate?" Bob chose his words carefully. Marcus was vague about that. "I think some of them are skeptical about martial arts, about whether your techniques would work against professional boxing. There might be some, let's call it professional curiosity. Bruce smiled, that knowing smile that people who'd seen him in action recognized as anticipation rather than amusement. Professional curiosity. That's a diplomatic way of saying they think I'm full of shit and want to prove it. Possibly, yes. Good, Bruce said, and his tone carried genuine enthusiasm. I'd rather deal with honest skepticism than polite pretense. What time should we be there? They arrived at the Southside Athletic Club at 2 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, when the gym was at its busiest, when all the serious fighters were training, when the atmosphere was most professional and focused. Bruce wore simple black pants and a red tank top, carrying a small gym bag. Bob wore workout clothes, clearly nervous about how this visit might unfold. The gym went quiet when they entered, not silent but noticeably quieter, conversations pausing mid-sentence, fighters stopping their training to look at these newcomers, this small Asian man and his friend walking into their professional space. Marcus Reed greeted them enthusiastically, clearly pleased that Bob had accepted the invitation. He made introductions, walking Bruce and Bob around the gym, showing them the facilities, introducing them to various fighters and trainers. Most were polite but clearly skeptical, their body language showing they didn't take Bruce seriously, didn't consider him a legitimate fighter despite whatever reputation he might have in martial arts circles. And then they reached the ring where Derek Williams was sparring with a journeyman middleweight, working on defensive techniques, practicing his slip and counter combinations. Derek moved beautifully, his footwork smooth, his head movement making him a difficult target, his counters sharp and precise. This was clearly an elite athlete, someone who'd spent thousands of hours refining his craft. Earl Thompson stood ringside, calling out instructions, making notes on a small pad, analyzing every movement. He noticed Marcus approaching with Bruce and Bob, and his expression showed immediate disapproval. The sparring round ended, Derek climbing out of the ring, breathing hard but controlled, eyeing his face showing the focus and intensity of someone completely dedicated to their craft. Marcus made the introduction. Derek, Earl, this is Bruce Lee, the martial artist I mentioned yesterday, and his friend Bob Breen, who runs that Wing Chun school up north. I invited them to visit, thought you might find it interesting to meet Bruce, hear about his approach. Derek looked Bruce up and down, and his expression was a mix of curiosity and dismissal. Bruce was clearly in excellent physical condition, his musculature defined and impressive for his size, but he weighed maybe 145 pounds. Derek walked around at 168 and could make 160 for fights. The size difference wasn't enormous, but in boxing terms, they were in different weight classes, and weight classes existed for good reasons. Bruce Lee, Derek said, extending his hand. Bruce shook it firmly. I've seen the Green Hornet. You do some impressive-looking moves on that show. The word impressive-looking carried clear implication. Not impressive, just impressive-looking. The difference between real and performance. Thank you, Bruce replied, his tone neutral. And I've heard about you. 23-2, 17 knockouts. That's a serious record. Derek smiled, pleased that Bruce knew his record. It's a start, still working toward a title shot, still improving. He gestured at the gym around them. This is where real fighters train, professional athletes who compete at the highest level of boxing. Not demonstrations, not movies, actual fights where someone wins and someone loses and the results matter. The implication was clear, and everyone within earshot heard it. This was a challenge disguised as conversation, a dismissal wrapped in politeness. Bruce's expression didn't change. You're absolutely right that there's a difference between competition and demonstration. Testing yourself against real resistance, that's essential for development. But you don't compete, Earl Thompson interjected, his voice harder than Derek's. You do demonstrations for audiences, you choreograph fights for television, you teach students who pay you money, but you don't step into a ring, don't test yourself against professional fighters, don't put your reputation on the line in actual competition. I've fought in challenge matches, Bruce replied calmly. Private matches against skilled opponents. But you're right that I haven't competed in organized boxing tournaments. Challenge matches, Earl repeated, or his tone dripping with skepticism. Private matches with no judges, no referees, no objective verification. Just stories that get told afterward, that get exaggerated with each telling, that become mythology instead of documentation. The gym had gone completely quiet now. Every fighter, every trainer, everyone in the building had stopped what they were doing to watch this conversation, sensing it was heading somewhere confrontational. Derek stepped in, his voice carrying authority. "Mr. Lee, I don't mean any disrespect. I'm sure you're skilled at what you do. But what you do is martial arts demonstrations and television fighting. What we do here is professional boxing. These are different things. And when martial artists claim they could beat professional boxers, it disrespects the years of training we've put in, at the thousands of rounds we've fought, the legitimate competition we've tested ourselves in." "I understand your perspective," Bruce said, "and I respect the dedication boxing requires, but I've never claimed general superiority. I've said that in a specific context, unarmed combat with no rules, my approach might have advantages over boxing. Different context, different optimization." "Might have advantages," Derek repeated. "That's a careful word. Very theoretical. How about we test it? Not in theory, in practice." Bob Breen stepped forward, his voice urgent. "Derek, that's not necessary. Bruce came here for a friendly visit, not for a confrontation." "I'm not suggesting a confrontation," Derek replied, though his smile suggested otherwise. "Just a demonstration. Mr. Lee claims his techniques work against boxers. I'm offering to help him demonstrate that. 1 round, 3 minutes, in the ring. We'll go light contact, just showing techniques, nothing serious. If his Jeet Kune Do is as effective as the magazine articles claim, this should be easy for him." Earl Thompson added his voice, clearly coordinating with Derek. "And if you're not willing to demonstrate, Mr. Lee, that tells us something too. It suggests that maybe all the claims about defeating professional boxers are just marketing, just stories to attract students and build mystique." The challenge was public now, witnessed by maybe 40 professional fighters and trainers, all of them clearly on Derek's side, all of them viewing Bruce as an outsider making extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. Bruce was quiet for a long moment, assessing the situation, reading the dynamics, saying understanding that refusing would be interpreted as fear regardless of the actual reasons. Then he looked directly at Derek Williams. "Not 3 minutes," Bruce said. "That's too long, and I don't want to risk either of us getting injured. 1 exchange. You attack me however you choose, full speed, full commitment. I'll defend and counter. That will demonstrate whether my techniques work against professional boxing or not." Derek's eyebrows raised. 1 exchange? That's it? "That's all that's needed," Bruce confirmed. "If my techniques work, 1 exchange will prove it. If they don't work, 1 exchange will prove that too." Earl Thompson laughed outright. "Son, 1 exchange proves nothing. Anyone can get lucky once. 3 minutes in the ring, that's how you really test someone." 3 minutes risks injury," Bruce countered. "See, and I'm not interested in hurting anyone or getting hurt just to satisfy curiosity. 1 exchange, that's my offer. If you're confident in your professional boxing skills, 1 exchange should be enough to expose whether I'm legitimate or just a movie star playing at martial arts." The phrase movie star landed hard, using Derek's own implied dismissal back at him. The gym erupted in excited conversation, fighters arguing about whether Derek should accept, whether 1 exchange was enough, whether this whole thing was a good idea. Derek looked at Earl, who shrugged. "It's your call, but 1 punch isn't enough to really test someone." "What kind of attack are you planning to use?" Bruce asked Derek. "So I know what to expect." Derek thought about it, then smiled. "I'm going to throw a jab cross combination. Standard boxing? Nothing fancy. My jab to set you up, my cross to finish. That's what I'd throw in an actual fight." "Full speed," Bruce confirmed. "Full speed," Derek agreed. "I'll be trying to actually hit you, not just showing the motion." "And I'll be defending and countering for real," Bruce said. "Not pulling techniques, not demonstrating in slow motion. Real speed, real intent. You understand that?" "Wouldn't have it any other way," Derek replied, his confidence absolute. He'd sparred with world-class professional boxers, had landed clean combinations on fighters with elite defensive skills. The idea that this martial artist, this movie star, could stop his jab-cross combination seemed absurd. They cleared space in the center of the gym, moving equipment to the sides, creating an open area about 20 feet in diameter. The entire gym had gathered now, forming a circle, every fighter and trainer present wanting to witness this, wanting to see whether the professional boxer would validate their skepticism or whether the martial artist would prove the impossible. If you're watching this story and learning something about Bruce Lee you never knew before, if this is showing you the reality behind the Hollywood legend, hit that subscribe button right now, because there are dozens more documented stories like this. True accounts that prove Bruce Lee was the real deal. Derek removed his training gloves and hand wraps, wanting to throw his punches bare-fisted like Bruce would be countering, making the test more authentic. He stood in his orthodox boxing stance, left foot forward, right foot back, hands up in a tight guard, the positioning perfect, textbook professional. Bruce stood in his neutral stance, feet shoulder-width apart, hands at his sides, no guard whatsoever, looking almost casual. To the boxers watching, this looked like suicide. No professional boxer would ever stand without a guard, without defensive positioning. It seemed to confirm all their suspicions that Bruce didn't understand real fighting. Earl Thompson had taken a position where he could see both fighters clearly. "Gentlemen, on my count. 3, 2, 1, go." Derek exploded forward with professional speed, closing the distance in 2 quick steps, his left jab snapping out with the kind of velocity that had surprised countless opponents, aimed directly at Bruce's face. The jab was a setup designed to force a reaction, to create an opening for the devastating right cross that would follow a split second later. But the right cross never came. What happened next occurred so fast that most of the witnesses couldn't fully process it until they discussed it afterward, comparing observations, trying to piece together a sequence that seemed to violate the laws of physics. As Derek's jab extended, Bruce's entire body shifted, not backward away from the punch, but forward and slightly to the left, slipping inside Derek's guard in the microscopic gap between the jab's launch and its full extension. His left hand rose in a motion so economical it barely seemed to move, intercepting Derek's jabbing arm at the wrist and redirecting it past his head by perhaps 2 inches. Simultaneously, Bruce's right hand shot forward in a straight punch, traveling maybe 8 inches from its starting position near his hip, and struck Derek Williams directly on the jaw, just in front of the ear, at the precise point where the mandible was most vulnerable to rotational force. The impact was a short, sharp snap of focused energy, not a power punch in the traditional sense, but a precision strike that leveraged Derek's own forward momentum against him. The force wasn't designed to cause massive damage, but to disrupt the nervous system, to scramble the signals between Derek's brain and his body, to achieve maximum effect with minimum effort. Derek's jab sailed harmlessly past Bruce's head, hitting nothing but air. His planned right cross never materialized because his body had already lost coordination, his nervous system overwhelmed by the precise strike to his jaw. His eyes went unfocused. His legs lost their strength, his arms dropped to his sides, useless. He stumbled backward 3 steps, his professional footwork completely gone, replaced by the uncertain movements of someone whose brain wasn't properly communicating with their muscles. Then his knees gave out, and Derek, the South Side Snake, Williams, professional boxer with 23 wins and 17 knockouts, sat down hard on the gym floor, blinking rapidly, trying to clear his vision, trying to understand what had just happened to him. The entire sequence, from Derek's initial movement to his collapse, took 8 seconds, maybe less. The gym exploded in chaos. Shouts of disbelief, fighters pushing forward to see better, trainers demanding explanations, everyone talking at once, because what they'd just witnessed contradicted everything they understood about boxing, or about fighting, about how physical confrontations worked. And if you're enjoying this story, if you're fascinated by these real accounts of Bruce Lee's capabilities, hit that like button. It helps more people discover the truth. Earl Thompson rushed to Derek's side, kneeling down, checking his fighter's pupils, his responsiveness. Derek was conscious but clearly dazed, his coordination impaired, his famous hand speed and reflexes temporarily offline. "Derek, talk to me," Earl demanded. "How many fingers am I holding up?" Derek blinked, trying to focus. 3? No, 2. 2 fingers. His speech was slightly slurred, his normally sharp mind struggling to process basic information. Bruce stood exactly where he'd been, his expression showing concern rather than triumph. He walked over to where Derek sat. C and Earl Thompson immediately moved to block him, protective of his fighter. "What did you do to him?" Earl's voice was angry, accusatory. "What kind of technique was that?" "I struck his jaw at the angle that causes maximum rotational acceleration of the skull," Bruce explained, his tone purely educational. "When the skull rotates suddenly, the brain moves inside the cranial cavity, causing temporary disruption of neural function. It's the same principle behind knockouts in boxing, but I'm using precision and timing instead of power." "That wasn't a knockout," Earl protested. "Knockouts look different, feel different. This was, I don't know what this was." "It's a controlled scrambling of neural signals," Bruce said. "Not a full knockout, not unconsciousness, just temporary disruption of coordination and cognition. He'll be fine in a minute or two." Derek was already recovering, his vision clearing, his mind rebooting. He pushed himself to his feet with Earl's help, standing unsteadily, one hand touching his jaw where Bruce had struck him. "I didn't see it coming," Derek said, his voice filled with confusion and something close to awe. "I threw my jab, I was setting up my cross, and then nothing. Just suddenly my brain stopped working right. What the hell was that?" "That was interception," Bruce explained. "You threw your jab, which is fast, very fast, but I wasn't reacting to your jab, I was reading the signals that preceded it. Your shoulder told me a jab was coming before your fist moved, your weight shift confirmed it. By the time your punch launched, I was already responding to your intention, not your action." Marcus Reed, who'd arranged this whole meeting, spoke up from the crowd. "But Derek's jab is one of the fastest in professional boxing. How did you have time to not only defend, but also counter?" "Because my counter traveled 8 inches, Bruce replied. "His jab traveled maybe 18 inches. Even if he's faster, I had less distance to cover. Economy of motion, efficiency of movement. These principles allow smaller, lighter fighters to compete with larger, stronger opponents." One of the other professional fighters in the crowd, a welterweight named Tommy Chen, pushed forward. "Do it again. I need to see it again to believe it wasn't luck." Derek shook his head, still recovering. "That wasn't luck, Tommy. I felt it. He didn't just hit me. He hit me at the exact right spot, at the exact right angle, with the exact right amount of force. That's not accident. That's something else, something I've never experienced in professional boxing." Earl Thompson was studying Bruce with completely new eyes, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by professional respect and curiosity. "Mr. Lee, I've been around boxing for 40 years. I've worked with 2 world champions, dozens of contenders. I've seen every kind of punch, every technique. But what you just did, that's not boxing. What is it?" "It's an integration of principles from multiple martial arts," Bruce explained. "Wing Chun's centerline theory and simultaneous defense and attack, Western boxing's understanding of angles and timing, fencing's concept of interception and counter time, physics and biomechanics applied to human combat. I've taken what works from different systems and discarded what doesn't." Derek had recovered fully now, his coordination back, his mind clear. He looked at Bruce with an expression mixing respect, humility, and genuine fascination. "I've been boxing professionally for 6 years. I've fought the best fighters in my weight class, and I've never felt as helpless as I did in those 8 seconds. You made me feel like a beginner." "You're far from a beginner," Bruce said firmly. "Your jab was fast, your setup was good, your technique was professional. You did everything right according to boxing principles. But boxing has constraints, rules, patterns. What I've developed is optimized for a different context. No rules combat where anything is allowed." "But you didn't need anything fancy," Derek protested. "You didn't kick me, so didn't grapple, didn't use any of the deadly techniques that martial artists always talk about. You just punched me, used the same basic tool boxing uses. But somehow it was completely different." "The tool is the same," Bruce agreed. "A straight punch is a straight punch, but the application is different. Boxing teaches you to punch through the target, to generate maximum force, to knock opponents out through accumulated damage or overwhelming power. I'm teaching precision over power, disruption over destruction. Different goals require different optimization. If you've made it this far in this story, if you're engaged and learning, Leave a comment below telling me what surprised you most. Was it the 8-second exchange, the precision of Bruce's counter, Derek's reaction? And I read every comment and want to know what resonates with you. Tommy Chen, the welterweight who'd asked to see it again, stepped forward. I want to try. I want to see if I can defend against it knowing what's coming. Bruce looked at him carefully. You're sure? I'll pull the strike so I don't actually disrupt your coordination, but the defense and entry will be the same. I'm sure, Tommy confirmed. Derek's good, but I'm faster. I want to see if speed makes a difference. They reset, Tommy taking his stance, Bruce in his neutral position. Earl Thompson counted down again, and Tommy launched not just a jab, but a full combination, jab cross hook, trying to overwhelm Bruce with volume and speed. Bruce slipped inside the jab just as he had with Derek, his interception even cleaner this time. Orton, his counterpunch stopped maybe an inch from Tommy's jaw, Bruce demonstrating complete control by not following through with the strike. Tommy froze, understanding immediately that if Bruce had wanted to actually hit him, he'd have been just as affected as Derek. The speed hadn't mattered. The combination hadn't mattered. Bruce had read the intention and intercepted before the techniques fully developed. Jesus Christ, Tommy breathed, stepping back. I threw 3 punches, and you were inside my guard before my jab was halfway extended. How is that possible? Pattern recognition, Bruce explained. You're trained in orthodox boxing, which means you'll throw certain combinations in certain sequences. Your jab sets up your cross sets up your hook. It's effective because most opponents are trained the same way, so they don't recognize the patterns as clearly. But I've studied boxing extensively, know the common combinations, can see them developing before they're fully executed. Earl Thompson was shaking his head slowly, his worldview being systematically dismantled. Mr. Lee, I owe you an apology. I came into this thinking you were a charlatan, a movie star playing martial artist. I was wrong. You've clearly developed something real, something effective. No apology necessary, Bruce replied. Your skepticism was reasonable. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and I just provided that evidence. Derek sat down on a nearby bench, still processing what had happened to him. Marcus Reed joined him, sitting down heavily. You okay? Marcus asked. Physically, yeah, Derek replied. Mentally, I don't know what I am. I've spent 6 years as a professional fighter, climbing the rankings, beating everyone they put in front of me. And this guy just made all of that feel irrelevant. Like I've been operating with incomplete knowledge, fighting in a narrow context without realizing how narrow it was. So, what are you going to do about it? Marcus pressed. Derek looked at Bruce, who was now demonstrating techniques to a group of fascinated boxers, breaking down the mechanics of his interception, explaining the principles in detail. I'm going to ask him to teach me, because whatever he knows, I need to know it too. Before we finish this story, I need to ask you one more favor. If you found this valuable, if you learned something about Bruce Lee, or boxing, or martial arts, please share this video. Send it to someone who boxes, who does martial arts, who thinks they understand fighting. Sharing helps preserve these true stories. The atmosphere in the Southside Athletic Club had completely transformed. What started as hostile skepticism had become eager curiosity. Fighters who'd been dismissive an hour ago were now asking detailed questions, requesting demonstrations, wanting to understand how Bruce's principles could integrate with their boxing training. Earl Thompson pulled Bruce aside for a private conversation. Mr. Lee, I train professional fighters for a living. I've been doing this for decades. And what you just showed us, that's going to change how I coach. Would you be willing to work with Derek, maybe with some of my other fighters? I think integrating your principles with their boxing could make them significantly more effective. Bruce considered the offer. Nah, I'm traveling frequently, but when I'm in Chicago, I'd be happy to work with serious students. Derek impressed me. His technique is excellent, his dedication is obvious. Learning what I teach won't make him less of a boxer. It'll make him a more complete fighter. Derek joined the conversation, his earlier hostility completely gone, replaced by the humility of someone who'd just discovered how much he didn't know. Bruce, I called you a movie star. I implied you weren't a real fighter. I was completely wrong, and I'm sorry. You were protecting your craft, Bruce said kindly. Defending boxing against what you thought were false claims. That's admirable. But now you've seen that what I teach isn't in conflict with boxing, it's complementary to it. Can you really teach me to do what you did? Derek asked. So to read intentions before they become actions, to intercept instead of just counter? I can teach the principles, Bruce confirmed, but it requires unlearning some of what you've been trained to do. Boxing teaches certain reflexes, certain patterns. Some of those will need to be modified. Are you willing to question your training, to potentially get worse before you get better? Derek didn't hesitate. After what just happened? Yeah, I'm willing to question everything I thought I knew. Over the following months, Derek Williams became one of Bruce Lee's dedicated students. Whenever Bruce was in Chicago, he'd work with Derek and several other fighters from the South Side Athletic Club, teaching them interception principles, timing drills, precision striking. Derek's professional boxing career actually improved dramatically after integrating Bruce's teachings, his already impressive hand speed becoming even more effective when combined with better pattern recognition and interception timing. He won his next 5 fights, all by knockout, and climbed to number 3 in the middleweight rankings before a hand injury forced his retirement in 1971. But he always credited those 8 seconds in November 1968 as the turning point in his development, the moment when he learned that being good at boxing didn't mean he understood all of fighting. Years later, after Bruce's death in 1973, Derek was interviewed for a boxing magazine article about cross-training and integration of different martial arts. The interviewer asked about the famous 8-second exchange. So Derek's answer became one of the most honest assessments of Bruce's abilities ever published in a mainstream boxing publication. I was a professional boxer, ranked nationally with legitimate power and speed. I'd beaten very good fighters. And Bruce Lee, who weighed 20 pounds less than me and had never competed in professional boxing, intercepted my best combination and countered so precisely that he shut down my nervous system in 8 seconds. Not through power, through knowledge. Through understanding fighting at a level I hadn't encountered in professional boxing. People ask me if I think Bruce could have beaten professional boxers in the ring under boxing rules. Honestly, probably not. Boxing rules favor boxers, that's obvious. But if you're asking whether Bruce understood combat, whether his techniques were effective, whether he could handle himself against professional fighters, the answer is absolutely yes. He proved it to me in 8 seconds that I'll never forget. The magazine published Derek's quote alongside a photograph of him training at his gym in Chicago, now teaching both boxing and Jeet Kune Do principles to young fighters, carrying forward the lessons Bruce had taught him. The Southside Athletic Club continued operating for another 20 years before closing in the late 1980s when the neighborhood changed and the economics of running a professional boxing gym became unsustainable. But during those years, it became known as one of the few boxing gyms that seriously integrated martial arts principles, where fighters learned both orthodox boxing and Bruce Lee's interception concepts. Earl Thompson, who'd initially been the most hostile to Bruce's presence, became one of his strongest advocates in the boxing community. He would tell anyone who'd listen that the best thing that ever happened to his training methodology was the 8 seconds in November 1968 when a martial artist from California proved that boxing, despite its excellence, didn't have a monopoly on fighting knowledge. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button one final time. Because Bruce Lee's story is filled with moments like this, 8-second exchanges that challenged fundamental assumptions, demonstrations that proved the impossible, humble teachings that transformed understanding. The legacy of those 8 seconds extends far beyond one gym in Chicago. It represented a meeting point between Eastern and Western combat philosophies, so between traditional boxing and innovative martial arts, between established expertise and revolutionary thinking. Neither system was proven superior. Both were proven incomplete, and from that incompleteness came growth, integration, evolution. Derek Williams weighed 168 pounds and had 23 professional wins. Bruce Lee weighed 145 pounds and had never boxed professionally. By every conventional measure in the boxing world, Derek should have handled him easily. His speed, his power, his professional training, his experience should have been more than enough to deal with a martial artist, a movie star, someone who hadn't proven himself in the ring. But in 8 seconds, Bruce demonstrated that fighting has dimensions that boxing alone doesn't fully explore. That reading intentions can be more valuable than reacting to actions. That precision can overcome power. That understanding combat at a deep, integrated, scientific level can allow you to defeat opponents who are superior to you in traditional metrics. Derek walked into that exchange planning to prove that professional boxing was superior to martial arts demonstrations. He ended up sitting on the floor, his coordination scrambled, his worldview shattered, and his education just beginning. 8 seconds that changed one man's career and influenced hundreds of others who heard the story. 8 seconds that proved you could be excellent at boxing and still be operating with incomplete knowledge about fighting. 8 seconds that showed the difference between mastering a system and understanding the principles that make all systems work. Bruce Lee weighed 145 pounds. Derek Williams weighed 168 pounds. See, Bruce had never competed professionally. Derek was ranked third in his division, and in 8 seconds, Bruce proved that none of those conventional measures mattered as much as understanding, precision, timing, and the humility to constantly question and evolve. Derek came to that gym as a professional boxer with a movie star. He left as a student who'd just met a master, and that master had taught him the most important lesson any fighter can learn, that no matter how good you are, no matter how much you've achieved, there's always more to discover, always deeper levels of understanding, always someone who sees the game differently and plays it better than you imagined possible. 8 seconds. One jab that never landed. One counter that changed everything. On one exchange that proved that sometimes the most important victories are the ones that teach us how much we still have to learn.